Thank you everyone for joining us, and welcome to this online panel discussion for the Town Hall Gallery exhibition, Do I Have to Spell It Out For You? My name's Stephanie Sacco and I'm one of the curators here at the Town Hall Gallery. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners as the original custodians of this land, including the Wurundjeri people in the northern part of our city, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. I'd like to introduce my colleague Ellie Hale, who's also a fellow curator at Town Hall Gallery, and thank her for her support in delivering this event today. Thanks, Ellie. Today we are joined by some of the artists who are featured in this exhibition. We are joined today by Kate Just, Nasim and Kenny Pittock. And during the next hour, we will hear from each of the artists as they discuss their work in this exhibition. And then we will open it up to a broader discussion about the power and value of using words, text and language in art. Just a couple of housekeeping points. After the discussion, there will be an opportunity for questions from the audience. At any stage during the discussion, please feel free to type your questions in using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And your questions will be read out by Ellie and myself towards the end of the discussion. This event also has live captioning. If you'd like to use this function, please click on the closed captions icon at the bottom of your screen and then select Show Subtitle. Please also note that we are recording this session. To give a brief introduction to this exhibition, this is the first exhibition that Town Hall Gallery has delivered exclusively online. Do I Have to Spell It Out For You features 8 artists incorporating language and text into their work to speak directly to their audience. Through puns, song lyrics, slogans and personal musings, the artists highlight the complexities of language to create community, define identity and tell stories. The combined works reveal the potency of words and language as a means of resistance, cultural artifact, joke and tool of sovereignty. I'd now like to firstly invite Kenny Pittock to speak about his ceramics and drawings that feature in this exhibition. Over to you, Kenny.
Thanks, Steph. Hi. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land I'm joining you from, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging who've been making art on this land for tens of thousands of years. My name's Kenny Pittock. I make ceramic sculpture. I also make painting, drawing. Sometimes I do murals. I work in a variety of different mediums. But usually, no matter which medium I'm working in, I often incorporate texts, sort of language, and wordplay. Just before we started this discussion, I was thinking about my relationship with text and art, because I've always loved writing and I've always loved making things. And growing up, I really thought I was going to be a writer. Like a journalist, and I think partly that's because just I didn't think art was something I couldn't imagine you could do that professionally. So I thought I had to follow a more be a journalist. And I remember being maybe 15 or 16, and I saw a book on Tracy Moffat, and it was her 1994 Scarred for Life series, which is one of my favorite artworks. It's a series of image and text works, combining image and text in a way that's really powerful, really like funny, but also really serious. And it deals with sort of mundane suburbia in a way that I just found really influential. And I even to this day, those are all elements that I think about in trying to make work for myself. So I guess if we're talking specifically about the artworks in this exhibition, Could we go back to the first slide? So this is a series of 5 ceramic sculptures that I made in the early stages of Melbourne's first lockdown, when I think I could feel collectively a lot of people in the world were grieving. And so the work is meant to be kind of playing on the 5 stages of grief, in a sort of an approachable, sort of colorful way, even though what it's dealing with is difficult. And so I've taken those 5 stages and turned them into flavors that you can pick and choose which one you might like at any given moment. So obviously there's denial donut, bargaining bubblegum, angry orange, depressed durian, and acceptance apricot. And yeah, I think again that was kind of dealing with something that I was struggling with in a way that was a bit more bright. I thought so there's kind of that duality there. If we move on to the next slide, which is the melted buffalo bill. This work I made a little bit earlier, before COVID, and it was really responding to the climate crisis and the awful bushfires that we had at the beginning of the year. And there's no text in this work, but the reason that I made it for this exhibition is originally my plan, as part of this exhibition, was to make use of the huge, beautiful walls within Hawthorn Town, the Hawthorn Town Hall Gallery. And I was going to do an installation of about 100 ceramic ice creams, and combined, it was going to spell out, I hadn't locked in the word, but I'm thinking that the word was going to be meltdown. So it was playing with not using text in the work, but using the work to create text. And even though I wasn't able to do that when the exhibition shifted online, I still wanted to include it in this show. And that's also why a lot of the sculptures in this show are of ice creams, because they were going to form a larger installation. And then if we move on to the next slide, again, this is a work that was responding to the climate crisis. So instead of a sunny boy, it's way too sunny boy. And it was just a play on the orange explosion flavor. And really that was it was also a shape, the shape of the sunny boy was something I wanted to make. So all of my work is hand sculpted out of earthenware clay, and then kiln fired, and then painted in either acrylics or glazes, and underglazes. So they all kind of have this wonkiness, this thumbprint to them, and I think that's something that I like about making work responding to sort of mass-produced items as well, is that they all, when you hand sculpt them, I don't use molds, because it's important to me to have that thumbprint in the work. And I think that's partly like growing up, I loved Wallace and Gromit. I've got my Gromit sitting next to me here. And so I just loved the thumbprint and the visibility of the hand in the work. This is the only sculpture in the exhibition that wasn't made this year. Obviously, this was made in 2017, while the country had the marriage equality postal vote. And so it was really just responding to a lot of people close to me were having an awful time, and I made this work as an attempt at solidarity. And so it's just playing on the ice creams again and the sort of imagery. And the next work this is quite a recent work. it's kind of made about coming out of lockdown, which is sort of what we're going through now-ish. In a way, it almost feels like some of the choices being taken away during lockdown makes things a bit easier. And then when we start to come out of lockdown and things open up, but there's uncertainty around, there's a lot of personal choices that we have to make now, about whether we want to up and go or sit and stay. And so this work is kind of about that choice. Again, using popular culture. So this drawing was going to be a mural. I was going to paint this very large out the front of the gallery. And I actually like it a lot as a drawing too. So I think it works in the show just as it is. And so it's kind of about personal growth, and it's kind of about trying to clean up after myself and not leave a mess. And so yeah, it was going to be the tree was going to be tree sized, but it's quite nice that it's quite small as well and screen sized now. And so the last piece that I have in the slideshow here, self-portrait as a tall puppy trying to stay underdog. So this work's called Tall Puppy Syndrome, and it's kind of just playing on two different idioms of the idea of the tall puppy and the idea of the underdog. And like a lot of my work, it's kind of just combining a couple of ideas and seeing how they fit together when they're not isolated. Yeah. And that's maybe where I'll leave that one.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kenny. We'll now pass over to Nasim, I think is next.
Hello, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Nasim, and I moved to Australia in 2009 from Iran, and I studied my master in visual art by research at University of South Australia. So since graduating, I've made a body of work connecting my past to present, from east to west, from the place I was born and place that now I feel like I belong to. And I worked with video art, photography, performance, and object sound. So I incorporated all of these mediums to my work to try to bring the two together. And either they complete each other or reject each other. There are so many things that bring the cultural differences between what I've experienced in the past and what I'm experiencing now. So, of course, one of those major differences between the two cultures that I've experienced is language. So it's really thoughtful from curators to bring bring some of my works to this amazing group of artists' work, because text, of course, language and text are very powerful medium for any artist to work with, and each of us pick up a different way to express, I think, ourselves. My work that is selected here, as you see in the image, is the work I made in 2017. It was a solo exhibition I've worked on with the title of Home and Habit, and what we call home in the West and in the East. And the trigger for this work was a photograph in my grandfather's album that was my grandma covered in a hijab next to the sister. And the back of the photo, it was written home, the word home on its own, nothing else to describe what is this person's name. So the word home was very special for me, especially coming from that photograph in an album, historical album. And then I did a major research about that this word home was used by men to call their wives. And they refer to the name of the wife in public as home. And so the negative connotation was just censoring the name of the wife in public, but the positive was home is everything to a man. Is the house, is the love, is everything, is the money. So therefore, calling a woman in the picture home is just got both of these sides. So I created these patterns of home with the Farsi alphabet. And the pattern is the word get repeated so much that I can't read it. A Farsi speaking person can no longer connect to the word. So therefore, it changed its feeling and its meaning and its look. So it's not easy to read for me as a Farsi speaker nor for an English speaker, but it connects both because it's talking about home, which means quite a lot of things in both cultures. So this was particularly the first step when I started to create that series of work. And if you go to the next ones, of course, you realize I've made light boxes, a lot of things, and kind of censoring myself behind the pattern of home. Because then coming from that culture after 10 years or 11 years now, somehow I don't recognize myself. Therefore, this pattern blocking me in a way that I can't see myself clearly. And I can't find a home for myself. But therefore, the pattern is just comes to a lot of my works and try to censor who really I am. And again, just connecting me to my past and who the person I am right now in the present. So, also the word habit, I've used that word habit in different patterns, and the habit is, of course, when you get used to everything, which is connecting to what we're experiencing now, as Kenny was saying, and how the habit always connects to what you're doing in your daily life and how difficult and how easy it is you get used to it. And therefore, if I am lost in a new culture, if I'm finding myself, and if I'm going through a difficult pattern, or if life is very easy and simple and I've got all the freedom I wanted and I so easily get used to it and I'm lost in that again. So this language is very special as part of my practice, and especially when I'm living in Australia, before even I get to be asked about myself, I get asked, where are you from and what's your background, where is your accent coming from? So I've also made a sound art when all of these questions are asked in a whispering sound. And therefore that's, again, this comes with the language attached to my identity. And how much I'm trying to escape my past, it's still very much attached to me. And there's no escaping. There's a video in this series of work that is curated in this show called Erasure. That was probably one of the first videos I made in 2010-11. And that was very, very early on when I started thinking video is my medium, because there's a lot of saying that I can't capture in one painting or one sculpture. It has to be moving. So therefore I can tell more to my audience or say more. So that video Erasure is, again, just writing quite a lot of text from my memory, and one hand comes and start erasing them. And then trying to erase it, not only you can't erase, but it also remains more obvious. So, and again, the act of memory, writing those sentences and trying to erase it, the remaining trace is more obvious and more dominant than the meaning of those words. Like suddenly, even as a Farsi speaker, I don't read it anymore. I'm just looking at the act of memory erasing, and it just catch you again. So there's another series of work in this series, I think from 2016, 40 pages. that refers to 40 pages of my passport. And then that's basically whenever I traveled and I faced difficulties as an Iranian passport holder in my first few decades of my life. And now I'm Australian, so I don't have those difficulties, but I can make work about it. Was that all the difficulties one has to go through by traveling, being born in particular countries, and all the stopping at the immigration offices. And each one of those stamp on my face that is building up is from a country that hold me in the immigration for lots of questions and lots of barriers for me not to be able to enter their country. And I had no issue whatsoever based on, you know, I was a clean passenger going to a new place without any political problems or anything, but I had to go through that pattern. So the pattern comes on my face and covers me and turns me to a person that is getting used to all of those difficulties. And then after going through decades of those difficulties, I become a dark person who I no longer know my real self, but I'm happily carrying that difficulties with me. So all those stamps with the writing of the country and a specification in the passport is, again, as a form of a text. When you go closer, you realize like there are all the countries I traveled to and the number of times I traveled to, so the dates are different. So I think I've worked with a lot of objects too, but language and alphabet are very special to me in my practice. To tell my stories, and a lot of times a lot of these things might mean differently to my Western audience than my Middle Eastern audience, and this is just for me very amusing to see, to watch, to hear, to receive all these different connotations with different sides of the world, and how much a language is helping my practice to be part of it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nasim.
Thank you.
And finally, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Hard act to follow those two, Nasim and Kenny, whose work I'm a huge fan of. My name is Kate Just. I would like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm living and working on, which is the Yalakut Willem clan of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and any First Nations people here in the Zoom today. The work that I have featured in this exhibition is a series of hand-knitted banners, retro reflective banners, and photographs that accompany them, which were made in 2013 and 2014. Initially, the first one, the Hope banner that you're looking at, was made on a British Council Realize Your Dream award. So I had won this award just before in the year previously to go to the UK and develop a new artwork. And just before I left to go on this residency and kind of development project, there were two high-profile sexual assault, rape, murder cases that happened in Melbourne. One was Tracy Connolly, a woman in my local neighborhood of St. Kilda, and not long after was Jill Marr from Brunswick. And these, the deaths of both women, but particularly Jill Marr, were responded to with vigils and walks in public space. And as a parent of a young child and a feminist and a person who has family ties to women who've experienced domestic violence and assault, I was really moved and sort of struggling, I guess, as I know a lot of women were, with the fact that we were in 2014 and the world just doesn't really seem any safer for women. And so I sort of changed my project a bit. I had initially planned to go to the UK and make works with communities of women. But then I started thinking as I was going to London and Leeds as part of the project that Leeds, the Reclaim the Night marches, which were part of early feminist women's liberation action, where women were walking through streets in a way of trying to reclaim the territories of their neighborhood in solidarity with each other, had started in 1977 in Leeds. So I started to think about actually beginning the project in Leeds and then bringing it back to Melbourne and doing a kind of sister version of the project in Melbourne. So you can see there, we were walking in public space with the banners in Leeds after it had been completed. So the project had 3 components. People would meet communally, be invited and meet communally to knit the squares of the banner together. Every knitter could knit or crochet their own square in whatever pattern they wished. So it reflected their own kind of bodily rhythm or techniques. Then I assembled the banner assembled the pieces into the banner, and then people would take walks with them. Different people would be invited to take walks with them out in public. And for this banner, I thought of the word hope because what I wanted to do was not actually make a work that was literally about violence against women, but which kind of activated what I could feel everyone wished for, which was a sense that you could walk through public space feeling like there's a possibility of feeling really safe and hopeful and optimistic for the future. And the work had that effect actually of really activating that idea, because when you walk in public space in a small group with people holding a banner that glows in the dark and says hope, people shout out to you, what do you hope for? what are you hoping for? And we would say back to them, well, what do you hope for? And people would shout to us what they're hoping for. And so it kind of activated this really optimistic social feeling in the streets. And this photograph, it was actually an accident that the police came on horseback at the same time. They were just doing a kind of neighborhood walk at night, like a neighborhood patrol, and they realized they matched the banners. And so they actually asked us if they could be in the photograph with us. So it's a kind of odd coincidence and I guess it creates in this photo what I felt like was a kind of interesting question about, are they there as a kind of ally, or, and what is the relationship of the police to the public in this instance? The banners are made from retro reflective fiber, which is the silver part the letters are made from, and also builder's line. So it's like the fluoro or black builder's line is this really urban fabric that's used in construction sites to, mark off areas where people shouldn't walk. So I wanted to construct them of really urban material, the kind of material you see on a cyclist's vest or a construction worker's clothing, to give them a sense of not being soft domestic textiles, but textiles which really relate to the urban space that they're in. So when I came back from Melbourne, from London and Leeds in the UK, the Melbourne version I really wanted to be a much more somber work, like a shield or a monument, because we were already carrying, I think as a community, the losses of women in our community so recently. So it was a sense of also generating a word which puts out into the world what we want. So it becomes like a wish, but it also was operating a bit as a banner or a shield, a shield or a kind of protective layer. So if you go to the next image, the photo of the safe walk, yeah, and then you can see there, it's sort of operating in that way. I thought of this was actually, in COVID times, it's the safe banner has such a different kind of connotation for me. It's sort of changed again. I guess the only other relevant thing maybe to say is that I guess this project is like most of the projects that I do, which is that it combines feminist history or questions around how women, cis and trans, are living in the world, are being kind of treated, how the experiences that we're having, how we might in solidarity and as a community address these questions, and how knitting or craft becomes a medium which has carried through so many really families of women and histories of women working with craft. So it's a language that goes really way, way back. And so when it's being used in a contemporary setting, it really kind of animates a very long history of women sitting and making and talking. So yeah, it's that, I guess that, what is the correct word? I can't find the word. No, it's the word where things mix together. Well, it's combination will do. It's the combination of craft, women's history, and a kind of social or political questioning of lived conditions, you know, that I guess is resonating through all my work and certainly does in this work.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. And thanks everyone for those insights into your work. I'll now just open it up to a bit of a broader discussion about the use of text and language in your art. Just a reminder to any of our attendees, if you've got any questions that you'd like to pose to the panel, please type them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll come to them in a few minutes' time. So firstly, I'd just like to ask all of our panelists, what drew you to working with text and words in your artistic practice to begin with? How did this process start for you? Kenny, would you like to go first?
Sure. It's hard to remember not combining the two. I think because I used to draw comics, and that was very much about combining the two. I like when maybe the text and the image say different things, and together it creates something that neither of them had individually. I think as well, even like, I remember when I was very young, I read a book of the letters written by Groucho Marx to people. And I remember one of his letters, he signed off with "Insincerely yours." And it really, like, I just thought it was so funny, and this like subversion of the words. And I think also growing up watching things like The Simpsons, which is very heavy with image, but there's so many written words in there. For me, there's like language and art have always been so meshed together, and I like what they can do together.
Nasim?
For me, text and working with language, especially the text, growing up back in Iran, we had this field that's called calligraphy, and we had to learn that as part of our art degree. And the calligraphy brings so completely another dimension to the, you know, the artistic way of writing a text, when it loses its meaning but adds a very attractive object. Just this is one word that is so attractive as an object that you can't even read it because you're so distracted by the look of it. And therefore it was always stayed with me profoundly that I have to bring somehow the text to my work because it's so telling. And you can't just look at it as it is a text to talk. It is actually, it can be a text as a form of art and looking at and just like something totally different than what we all know. So maybe that was part of me that I incorporated to my video works quite a lot, and then some photography. And then again, as I described, it's the language of my past, that so many things that you want to do suddenly comes from your mother tongue, and you just want to put that down, and it connects to you somehow, sometimes with that language and the current language, and you live it out there, and the audience wouldn't be connect to it, and they actually connect to the beauty aspects of it sometimes, rather than what it's actually telling you, what it's saying in that image. So that's probably how it all grew with me and with my practice.
So that leaves me. I like how we're going in the same order. It's very organized. I can't remember, like Kenny, I can't remember when it began, except to say it's always been there. It was there in childhood. It was there when I was starting out at art school. So I've always looked at the interplay of text and material, and been really interested as well to see what happens when text becomes 3D, or it repeats, or it becomes integrated into a very material kind of medium in an artwork. And I guess it's relevant in a sense because someone's asked in the chat what I'm knitting right now, that I'm carrying over my love of text into a work where I repeatedly knit panels that say anonymous was a woman for over 16 months. So I'm on to panel number 109. And every panel says, see, I have a mirrored zoom, so you're seeing it backwards, anonymous was a woman. And they're all different colors. And for me in this work as well, text, it's a way of, through the repetition of a same text, it starts to speak to labor, time, the invisibility of kind of women's artwork in the canon and how it gets erased. So it's one text, but as it repeats and as it continues to manifest and appear, it takes on another kind of agency. It almost works against its own meaning in a sense. It sort of denies a kind of anonymity and demands a kind of material presence. So yeah, I think for artists it's really interesting because text is embedded into a kind of materiality, and that's what's so interesting.
That leads really nicely into my next question. And Nasim, you did touch on this in your response about the aesthetic quality of text and characters. How do you sort of navigate that in your practice in terms of what text and words can bring in its aesthetic form? So how, for example, Kenny, you the text that you have in your work looks like your handwriting. How did you come to choosing that particular font and size and all of that in terms of your work?
So with the drawing specifically, yeah, I mean, that is just my handwriting, which I suppose you can see if I look at my earlier drawings, it definitely has changed and developed over time. But with some of the sculptures, I'm often mimicking text of other fonts and handwriting. So with like the Up and Go, Sit and Stay, I had to sort of paint the words sit and stay using the Up and Go fonts, even though there weren't many, if any, of the same letters. So I had to kind of imagine what the other letters in that font would look like. And really trying to replicate that as best as possible is just so that with looking at it peripherally, it looks like the thing that I'm referencing, and that people look at it, they come into it with that expectation, and then if it's accurate enough, I'm able to then subvert that. But I have made a lot of work about handwriting as well. Specifically, I, for many years, have collected shopping lists that I find. I've worked off and on at supermarkets over the years, and so I really love shopping lists. And one of the things that I like about them is the handwriting, and you can kind of try and guess the person who might have written something by the, whether they do a circle at the top of their eye, whether they write in capitals or cursive. So text in like the aesthetic of text is something I find very interesting. Yeah.
So Kenny, you use references to popular culture and consumer culture in your work. How do you use the inherent or the loaded communal meaning in those works to bring your own sort of personal messages across?
Yeah, I like to play with that and to bring, like I say, the sort of expectations that people have. But it does mean that you have to do a lot of research into what connotations certain things have, because that's inherently loaded into the work. And I like that, but it's just so long as you have to kind of think about it. It's tricky though, like certain items like ice creams are so full of nostalgia for a lot of people. And then, some people, they have their own like very different relationships with these items. And so it's interesting to sort of pluck something out of a milk bar and put it in a gallery, and then the relationship that people have with that item is something that they can consider in a way they might ordinarily not have. And so I like being able to do that. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I've certainly, feel that sort of, as soon as I see your work, I definitely feel that nostalgia. It takes me personally back to a time that was, happy and warm and sunny. But then when you get closer and realize that the text isn't what it seems, it just sort of throws off your sense of reality, I guess, and makes you stop and re-examine and reconsider what the works are actually saying. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Just wanted to change tact completely and just throw out there the idea. I just wanted to ask, how do you feel about the idea that, now that we're in a social media age, words, and not just necessarily paragraphs and paragraphs of text, but, it could just be reduced to sentences or hashtags. They can now have power to bring about real and immediate and widespread social change. Kate, for example, I know that you, in another body of work, have looked at this sort of phenomenon in terms of what a hashtag could do, and how just words or just a couple of words put together can, bring up so much more meaning than just those words themselves.
Yeah, I think for me, social media has been a really interesting space of using text with artwork, actually, and then using it to generate conversation as well. So not just via the hashtag, but kind of it for me, since about 2014 and 15, I've been using social media as an embedded part of every work while I'm making it. And so there's a text that accompanies every single work, and the text is being shared during the making of the work. And so it's almost like this whole audience or community that's sharing in the making of it is having this whole experience before the work ever hits a gallery. And that actually ends up being a significant part of the artwork. So my feminist fan series was one such series where I would knit an homage to a feminist artist who is a hero to me, and every single work was accompanied by this love letter to the artist, explaining why I think they're significant to the canon of feminism, but also to me as an artist personally. And then I would sign it the artist's name, such as Yoko Ono, I'm your feminist fan, and then use this hashtag feminist fan, and then you can search that hashtag, and this whole, like, all the kind of works over 3 years come up in the texts about them, and it then is used by other people as well. I'm using it currently for the Anonymous Was a Woman project as well, sharing statistics about the ways women are included in the art world but erased from the canon and from the market, and also sharing personal stories about my own experience of being a mother and a full-time teacher and trying to make art and fit it in, and how that is a kind of quite distinctly kind of female juggle in a way, and how it sort of connects to so how the work, I guess, connects to those other kinds of personal experiences. So yeah, for me, social media is really useful, valuable tool for adding text to artwork, and really sharing it with a broader community of people. And even now, I've started this project with Tal Fitzpatrick called the COVID-19 Quilt. And people send us little textile squares they've made during COVID to share their experience from all around the world. And each one's accompanied by a text, and the texts are coming in all different languages as well. And then where possible, we're translating them. So you've got multiple texts in multiple languages under the different submissions. So again, it's about talking to the audience in a way and sharing the work through text. I'll stop there. I'm a Gemini. You won't shut me up once I get going.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah. Just going back to the title of the exhibition, Do I Have to Spell It Out for You? Do you feel like that's what you're doing? By using text in your work, you're actually being explicit about your meaning? Or do you think that there's sort of an element of interpretation and what an audience can bring to the work that's still available to be explored in that space?
Yeah, I think the whole point of, I guess, text is that it was actually really funny because today I got in a little semi-argument with my two kids where they were arguing about the meaning of a song in a movie, and they had two different positions, and finally I brought up this article for them which showed how the song changes, the meaning of the song changes through the movie, through different scenes, through the character's own experience. And I was explaining to them that a text or a song or an artwork is never fixed in meaning, even if the artist tells you what it means, or the writer, the filmmaker, you as a person will experience it differently, and it's open to interpretation, and that's what's so good about it. It really genuinely is that open. So, and I teach art, and I hear students say, oh no, you got it, but you didn't because it means this. And I always say to them, no, like, hang on a second, you don't own meaning. Meaning's in the work, and it's open to interpretation, and you, even as an artist, cannot determine the meaning of your own work. People have their own perceptions, and that's the whole point. So yeah, even if I do spell it out, I will fail to control the minds of my audience.
Nasim, how do you feel about that?
I absolutely agree with Kate. It's a really amazing take on the how it's never fixed, but also not only in language, a lot of things are not fixed. Major part of my practice, especially the work I did with this whole idea of celebration, the finger snapping in the Middle Eastern way, which you can see a little work here behind me that also is basically an act of celebration in Middle East, and that the two finger comes together and do this. And this is simply to the Middle East and East. If you divide the world to East and West, so the Eastern part, they think it's celebration. The Western part, which is just like, wow, what is it? Is it a gun shooting? Are you trying to do some bang bang, or like, that's crazy, that's anxious, we don't get it. So there's no fixed meaning. It's just like we grew up understanding that as a celebration, and then I slowly teaching my audience this way. This could also mean celebration, but it could also mean war. So the same thing with the text, but in particular, the title of your exhibition connects with me because of my name, Nasim. And every single time since I've been in Australia for the last 10 years, I pick up the phone and they ask, can I have your name? And I say Nasim. They say, can you please just spell it for us? And then this is spelling that has been part of my identity, because without it, it means like I don't have a name. So it's been really, really strong connection to me that when you proposed this exhibition with this title, I was like, wow, this is like my daily life. Do I have to spell it out for you? And I have to ask it. If they don't ask me, I know they're writing it in, like they misspelling it. So I have to make sure I spell it. And quite a lot, and often the name comes to my letterbox is absolutely wrong and double S, triple something that is just like, they couldn't even get it after spelling. So that again, I just wanted to have that entry point for a lot of us who move from one country to another. We have all very strange names, and then how much we have to do work on the spelling to make it like sound right, or at least written it right on paper. And then how much I connected to this title of your exhibition when you proposed, like, this is my life. And but apart from that part, again, as Kate said, like my work, literally the word does never have, it never says one thing, it's quite a lot of things. And also as a child growing up, the word, as I've used, home or habit, had completely different meaning than now, and it will have a different meaning than in 10 years time. So it constantly changes. So that's from me.
I'm sad to say that we're running out of time already. Ellie, do we have any questions from the audience?
We have a very shy audience. Aside from somebody wanting to know how many kids you had, Kate, which thank you, you've already answered that. Yeah, we haven't got too many coming in, but I thought it might be nice to, we've heard a little bit about what you're working on at the moment, Kate, but perhaps we could hear about some new projects that Nasim and Kenny are working on at the moment.
Kate, you go first.
Oh, but I've already talked about what I'm going on. I think you both should go. I've spoken about my COVID quill and my anonymous, so I'm going to cede my time to the other two brilliant artists on that question.
Okay. So I might just go then. Right now I'm just working on the series of work based on a historical object called Sorme, S-O-R-E-M-E-H. So that's a traditional way of eyelining women's eye in Middle East. It's from thousands of years ago. It's a very dark charcoal in a very particular container that they used to do the makeup for their eyes, and that now translate to what we call eyeliner in contemporary world. But I'm just doing again a series of writing with that particular object, because that used to be used for beautifying a female face, but I'm just changing the meaning to writing with it, and also doing a series of objects which are quite unusual. So you probably again wouldn't understand what it is, and it just looks very strange, but it's literally a simple container for eyeliner that women used to a very primitive time, like very, very early on. And I had to send somebody to find it for me because it's no longer used. So it only like a kind of museum object now, but to also translate that whole container to a contemporary look, which brings the both together again, the past and present together. So that's one thing that I'm making and working on, but also my whole head is occupied with my New York exhibition in Asia Society Museum that will be opening 27th of October in New York. So it's been too many a stop, change the plan, go ahead. So send the artwork again. It will be online, and now it definitely will be physical. So it's been I was supposed to be in New York right now for 3 months residency, so I couldn't go because of all the COVID. So therefore everything is communications, and all the panel discussion, organizing the date for all of these things we're doing now with them. So that has to be first passed for me to start getting back to making my work again. That's what I'm working on.
So I've been working on a series of actually ceramic plants, like they're potted orchids, which I've really been enjoying because I'm making, they're very organic shapes, the leaves, the stems, the flowers, and glazing the pots as well. And so all of the orchids are playing a different classical instrument. So there's an orchid playing a cello, there's an orchid playing a violin, there's one on trumpet, one on clarinet, one with a trombone. And so, I mean, the wordplay there is that it's an orchestra. And so together all these plants create the one orchestra. And really the work is meant to be about sort of how we're all sort of slowing down a little bit and listening to nature in a way that we maybe haven't as much more recently. And so that's a series of works that will be exhibited. It actually opens next Friday in Canberra as part of it's called Contour 556, and it's a biennial held every 2 years in Canberra, and which is nice that even though I'm kind of homebound, that my sculptures get to go on a little holiday, as Nasim has probably you've been experiencing with New York as well. And other than that, I also have a show in New South Wales at Tweed Regional Gallery that opens in November. So I'm working towards that as well, called Planes, Trains and Buffalo Bills. And the title of that really comes from, I watched that movie for the first time during lockdown, and it was, I really liked it. But also just the relationship that we have now with public transport and planes and things like that. It's kind of examining that in a sort of in a 2020 landscape, because I do miss taking the train, I think, and I don't know when I'll be able to feel comfortable on the train again. On how long that might take, yeah.
I think that's
kind of exploring that in a more playful way than it sounds, yeah.
I think that's a very shared experience for a lot of us. You know, trying to imagine what travel is going to be like and how long it will take for us to, yeah, as you say, feel comfortable doing that again. So, yeah. Well, I think unfortunately that brings us to the end of our session. We've run out of time. Thank you so much to all of our guests who've joined us this afternoon. Thank you so much to the artists for your participation in this panel discussion, and also for your involvement in the online exhibition. If you do have any questions that we were unable to get to, or perhaps you'd prefer to email us, you're very welcome to do so, and we can pass them on to the artists. Our email address can be found in your registration confirmation email. Please join our digital community by signing up to our e-news via the City of Boroondara website, and follow Town Hall Gallery on social media. I'd just like to mention that we do have 2 more public programs coming up as part of this exhibition. The first is an online cinema session, which will be on Wednesday the 14th of October at 7 p.m, We'll be screening the film The Miracle of the Little Prince, which is an inspiring documentary that investigates how 4 communities from across the globe have used translations of a particular children's book to keep their language and culture alive. And the second program is an online conversation with exhibiting artist Claudia Nicholson and curator Yvonne Muniz-Reid on Saturday the 17th of October at 2 p.m. and they will be discussing in depth Claudia's multi-layered project All I Have Are Dreams of You, which is also part of this exhibition. Both of these events are free and you can book online on our website. For more information about the Town Hall Gallery programs, please visit www.burundara.vic.gov.au/arts. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. Take care and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.